So the newest inductees tonight are distinct as their achievements. Yet there are some qualities that are the same, common to all of them. They're all entrepreneurs, mindful of the business and financial aspects of the industry. They were innovators, willing to think outside the box and find smarter and better ways to discover mineral wealth and improve our industry performance. They were versatile, wearing many different hats during their respective careers. So I will start with our first inductee tonight, and it's actually a team known affectionately as the Two Bobs, Robert Hunter and Robert Dickinson. The Two Bobs have achieved legendary status as one of the most successful and enduring partnerships in Canadian mining history. Established in 1985, their partnership continues to be the inspiration for Hunter Dickinson Inc., one of North America's most respected mineral exploration and mine development groups. Now, Bob Hunter was a top producing life insurance agent before joining the junior miner scene. Later, he told George Cross of Newsletters fame, that is here tonight, the secret of his success in mining was to make 100 cold calls every day. And I would not have believed it unless I walked in his office and I actually saw the man in action. He had a row of black binders that was like the size of about a 50-foot room, and he would sit at his desk, and Bob Dickinson would give him the scenario for the day. Here's the new drill hole, and Bob would start calling, and he would call and call and call. And you know what? His dedication was, because he did that, he was able to raise the money that Dickinson needed to go drill. And with that, they became very successful. Now, he would work from beginning of the day to the end of the day, but let me tell you, he had an incentive. He had 7 kids to feed and clothe, and he needed those calls to pay off. Okay, now talking one day about his feeding his kids, Bob told me that their family dinner menu usually consisted of 2 things, 2 choices: take it or leave it. His money-raising skills came in handy when he teamed up with Bob Dickinson, an astute geologist with an MBA and an entrepreneurial bent. Soon after, they took the reins of North American Metals and advanced the Golden Bear project in northwestern BC. In 1988, Homestake Mining made a $40 million bid for the project, which began coal production a year later. A string of successes followed, notably the sale of the Mount Milligan copper-gold project to Placer Dome for, at the time, the incredible sum of $182 million in 1990. And then the development of the Kemess gold project, both in BC. Now, Kemess is now a producing mine, and Mount Milligan is under construction by Thompson Creek Metals in preparation for production next year. Bob and Bob earned wide respect for their dogged perseverance through industry downturns, technical, legal, and political challenges. They personified the pioneering spirit of their home province of British Columbia and had enormous faith in its mineral potential. Their influence was so great that they were grudgingly dubbed House Street royalty by a business columnist with a long history of criticizing Vancouver junior stock promotions. And boy, did they work hard. Bob Hunter was a fixture at mining and investment conferences, standing at a booth for 8-9 hours a day, talking to investors, never gave up, while Bob Dickinson delivered the top quality projects and detailed information demanded by analysts and fund managers. This ethic, along with the principle of responsible mineral development, continues at HDI, which has evolved into a global powerhouse involved in a dozen mining projects on 6 continents. Among them, the giant Pebble copper-gold moly project in Alaska, which could help kickstart President Obama's job creation program. Now, like someone said, I mean, Dickinson's dogs probably created more jobs than any of Obama's job creation program, but that's a whole different thing. In the meantime, HDI is forging ahead with its next generation of mines, including Prosperity in BC, with the same can-do spirit that made the two Bobs famous more than 25 years ago. So, I will ask Ronald Thiessen, President and CEO of Hunter Dickinson, is here this evening with Bob Dickinson and Bob's wife Carmen and son Matthew, and David Hunter, attending with his brother Scott and son Wyatt, will accept the award on behalf of his late father, Bob Hunter. I'll ask Ron to escort Bob and David to the podium and make the presentation.
Pierre, thank you very much for that illustrious introduction, and I don't know, it must have been prophetic because you've given us all the mining detail and I might not talk so much about mining and resources. It's with a great deal of pride and a copious amount of humility that I've been honored with the opportunity to present you this evening with David Hunter and Scott Hunter representing Robert G. Hunter, Bob H. as we knew him around the office and the world knew him, and Robert H. Dickinson in person as Bob D. for induction in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. I've known these gentlemen since early 1988 when we made a most fortuitous trip to Mount Milligan project in BC, up until Bob H.'s passing a number of years ago, and Bob D. obviously to today, and I know into the future. I've been able to call both these gentlemen my partners, and I am really truly honored to have been asked to provide this introduction and brief history. Now, when I spoke to the authorities at the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, I was admonished to keep my introduction and commentary to a mere 4 minutes or face a potential hook of Mr. Lassonde. I pleaded but of 4 inductees, that's being 3 single and 1 two-man group. I'm introducing 2, so I must at least obtain 8 minutes. Not dwelling on administrative issues, both Bobs are legendary in the Canadian mining industry, and we need to focus on their accomplishments, but really who they are. And while I've known both Bobs for 20 years, trying to compress those accomplishments, those accolades, the notoriety, the rival stories, the experiences even into an entire evening is daunting and has given me great angst. How do I tell you what 2 completely different people accomplished over a lifetime, but together became known as the legendary 2 Bobs? And as Pierre said, our organization might legally be called Hunter Dickinson Incorporated in recognition of the founders. We are still today referred to as the 2 Bobs organization. In fact, simply the name Bob in our company is an honor. And I recall in the late 1990s when I was presenting at a large conference, one of our projects, the moderator introduced me as Bob Thiessen. I knew I had achieved a milestone. Bob H. and Bob D. were as different as can be imagined. One statesman-like, intuitive, dapper, gregarious, and routine. The other, informal, intense, and detailed, tactical, a need for occasional solitude, but still a potential for spontaneity. And as I said, they were very different, but seemed to fit together extremely well, like Bob H.'s legendary handshake, firm, but comfortable, and always confident. Bob H., as Pierre said, entered the mining industry about 1980, having just retired from a successful career in the life insurance business. He always said he'd never retired at anything. He brought with him a great outgoing personality, salesmanship, and a drive to succeed. Bob D. knew geology and mining were in his blood from the early summer he spent as a camp worker on an exploration program in his latter high school days. Bob D. went on to university to obtain a master's in science and geology, as well as designations in finance and administration. He worked as an exploration geologist for a major mining company for some juniors and a stint as a resource analyst in the brokerage industry before he became a dedicated entrepreneur in his own right in the early 1980s with his own junior exploration program. I racked my memories and those of my partners for recollections, stories, whatever, to bring to you what I think would be the true picture of the two Bobs. Alas, my partners provided a multitude of stories but could not knit together the desired results. And then I had an epiphany, not unlike Brad Pitt in Moneyball. Nothing to do with mining or resources, but passion. Sometimes it's the other things that people do outside of their main enterprise, which they do for hobby or passion, which really tells you as much more about the individual than a simple recollection of their entrepreneurial accomplishments. Both Bobs had a unique love for the outdoors. Bob D, simply the joy of geology in the field, or aboard his Zodiac circumnavigating Vancouver Island or the island archipelagos in Alaska. And Bob H in his garden on sunny days on the weekends. Weekdays were preserved for working. However, both Bobs loved fishing, salmon fishing in the coastal waters of British Columbia in particular. Again, there are legendary stories about salmon derbies with prizes in the tens of thousands of dollars, high-end lodges, or very simple and basic salmon fishing clubs and camps. My experience with the two Bobs and fishing took place on a fishing trip to Langara Lodge on a trip I had purchased at a special Olympics charity auction in 1996. How about it came about is not important. What is important is that there were four of us on this trip. Bob H, Bob D, Bill Bell, who is here this evening as well, and myself. And my experience on that trip with Bob D and Bob H is really telling about who they were and what they're all about. 4 people on a 4-day fishing excursion to a fishing lodge at the north end of the Queen Charlotte Islands, or Haida Gwaii as they're more commonly referred to today. 1 day of travel, 3 days of fishing. Each day we're out in 2-man boats, so 4 people, 3 days. That means everyone's going to spend 1 day in a boat with each other person in the group. And in this instance, a fishing day generally is somewhere between 6 and 12 hours, so you're going to get to know the person. We arrived at Langara, and the first evening during dinner, we determined that the order of boat companions, as it was, I spent the first day with Bob D, the second day with Bob H, and the third day with Bill Bell. And Langara is known not only for its unique fishing experience, but also its cuisine and libations. So I thought it appropriate to establish the order of the next day's events before libations became the controlling factors, at least for me. As I was going out with Bob D, and I was a novice fisher person, and Bob D, a legendary fisher person, I asked, what time should we have breakfast before we get out in the boat? He looked at me aghast. The answer was, forget breakfast, we'll eat on the boat. Be on the dock at 4:45 a.m. We need to prepare the bait and be out in the fishing grounds before the sun's up. I said, okay, this is my last scotch. I dragged my sorry butt out of bed the next morning and hustled down the dock. Bob D was already there. He told me to dump the bait the lodge had put in our bait box and help him prepare the special cut plug herrings for our fishing efforts. Bob D showed me how to gut and dehead a herring in a manner that would assure that the herring bait would gyrate, turn, and wobble like a naturally mortally wounded herring, something which would be desirable to a Tyee spring salmon. Having eviscerated sufficient bait, we headed out to the fishing grounds for my second lesson. Once there, Bob D instructed me on the proper technique to thread and bury the steel hooks into the herring in a manner which would not cause the bait to act in an unnatural manner, and the cold steel of the hooks would not be evident to the voracious Tyees. We spent about 16 hours that day on the fishing grounds. Bob D instructing and educating me on the finer and tactical elements of salmon fishing, bait evisceration, hooking, trolling, tidal movements, eddy channels, the nocturnal and daytime routines and feeding regimen of the Tyee salmon. It was intense, it was detailed, it was tactical, but most importantly, it was designed for success. Fortunately for me, we made it back to the lodge for dinner and drinks, because I rather enjoy eating salmon more than procuring them. Thinking that I'm now at least a baccalaureate of salmon fishing, I inquired Bob H, what's the schedule for tomorrow? Are we meeting on the docks prior to 5 a.m.? Bob H. looked at me perplexed. No, we'll have breakfast at 7 a.m. and probably be on the fishing grounds by 9, depending on the weather. Given my day's experience with Bob D., this was perplexing to me, but given my proclivity for a good night's sleep, I was not going to argue. The next day, Bob H. and I had a truly memorable breakfast at Langara Lodge, in large part due to the fact that one chapter of the Hells Angels had taken over one of the lodges, and they were in the restaurant that morning, having come directly from partying, and were still taking down copious quantities of sambuca with their eggs. We get out to the docks just before 8 a.m., and I'm about to remove the standard bait packages as Bob D. had instructed me the day before, when Bob H. stops me and says, "Do you know how to hook the herring?" I say, "Well, Bob D. taught me yesterday." He says, "Good. The standard bait lodge is fine. Let's get going." And we get there, you bait the hooks. This is Bob H., and who am I to question a Bob? I have not attained Bob or PhD status at the time. When we get out to the fishing grounds, I bait Bob H.'s hook for him, and I ask him if he'd like me to put the rod in the rod holder. He says, "Absolutely not. Hand him the rod, and he's going to take a nap while we troll around in the general vicinity of the other boats." I ask him, "Should we be looking for tidal lines or eddy pools?" thinking I know something about salmon fishing. Bob H. says no, he thinks there's going to be a lot of bait in the water all around the Langara boats, and that's going to attract a lot of salmon, so it's simply an issue of being more attractive. I said, "If you're going to nap, won't you lose the entire rod and reel if you get a salmon on while you're sleeping?" He says, "Ron, you obviously don't understand. While I am sleeping, I am having wonderful thoughts and dreams. Those are being transmitted down the rod, down the line, through the hook, through the bait, into the water, and to the salmon. The Tyee are going to want my bait, my hook, because it's more compelling and more desirable than anyone else's." And so we launched. Bob H. asleep in the bow with the rod firmly in his hands, and a fishing technique which I would best describe as unique, intuitive, and relaxed. But by the end of the day, very successful. So, why have I told you this fishing story, or fishing tale as it's usually referred to? Well, it's because the reality is it was about two people who have been uniquely successful, employing very different methods and approaches, yet completely compatible objectives. In fact, I would say a singularity of purpose. And I, in fact, believe exponentially successful. This is an apt demonstration of the proposition that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. One Bob plus one Bob not only gave you the two Bobs, but it gave the Canadian mining industry, our shareholders and other stakeholders, many successful resource developments. In fact, in the past 25 years, HDI, the two Bobs, have sourced, developed, and realized through development or sale more than 10 major mining projects, some of which Pierre talked about. A track record of discovery, rediscovery, and development success that I think is unequaled in the mining history. I could list all of their accomplishments and their awards, their accolades, but I'm probably out of time, and Pierre's got the hook out. The two Bobs are legendary mining people. They are also tremendous family people. They are community people. Bob H. was well-known, well-respected in the Kiwanis organization. Bob D. was one of the founding members and really the driving force behind the Britannia Mining Museum. And I have been one of the most fortuitous people to be able to call both of them my partners and my friends. So I'd like to present to you Scott and David Hunter, Bob Hunter's sons, and after that, Bob Dickinson.
Everyone's entitled to one bad day of fishing, but we don't allow for one bad day of mining. Actually, I'm not usually the beneficiary of Ron's eloquence, but I guess tonight's a very special occasion in many ways, so thank you, Ron. Mr. Chairman, distinguished head table guests, fellow inductees, ladies and gentlemen, It's an incredible honor for me to be inducted into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame with my great and late partner, Bob Hunter. I know that this night and honor will definitely go down as one of the great highlights of my life. I'm going to say a few words to you first, and then David and Scott Hunter will speak. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for selecting Bob Hunter and I to the, as inductees to the 2012 Hall of Fame. And I'd especially like to thank the Northern Miner who put our names forward. Vivian Danielson, one of the many great editors of the Northern Miner, had a lot of time for Bob and I to tell our stories, an inordinate amount of time to tell our stories, and we're appreciative of her. I'd also like to thank those people who prepared and organized and supported our nomination. Also, I'd really like to thank our friends and supporters that here tonight. Many of you have come from long distances, and I think, maybe I shouldn't say this, but as we all know, Toronto in the middle of January is not really on the forefront of anyone's list to visit. And there's only one thing I love more dearly than the mining industry and the role I play at Hunter Dickinson, and that is my family. I'm very thankful for all the love and support I so freely receive from my wife, Carmen, and my son, Matthew, and my daughter, Crystal. Without this foundation, you guys, my career would not be anywhere near so much fun. Bob Hunter and I met in 1985. I was 37 years old, and he was 58. We didn't know each other, but we'd both been asked to run a company together. And actually within 10 minutes of meeting each other, we said, okay, let's do it. Over the following 2 years, our first adventure, North American Metals, became a great success, and the rest is history. Bob and I did have many, many successes together, but really, how did the Bob and Bob show, as George Cross called us, how did we morph over time into the success that is now Hunter Dickinson Inc? A team of 130 people committed to the discovery and development of mines around the world, with the creation of companies that currently employ over 7,000 people at sites around the globe. Where I think we excelled because we had the ability to attract and fully embrace skilled and creative partners and other members to the team. These partners joined us, and they had the same passion for success that you've heard that Bob and I had, but they each brought a different skill. Skills that gelled together to form the miracle that is HDI. At first, it was Jeff Franzen, Doug Forster, and Aziz Sharif, along with the world's greatest den mother, Shirley Main. In 1986, for North American Metals, Jeff drove a 5,000-foot long, 10 by 10 tunnel into a steep mountainside right through the heart of the Golden Bear deposit with no infrastructure around for hundreds of miles. After we sold our next discovery, Mount Milligan, in 1990, the team picked up momentum when Ron Thiessen, Dave Copeland, Scott Cousins, and Jeffrey Mason came on board, and they started making huge contributions. It was Ron's brilliant financial engineering that created our El Condor sale and our Gibraltar mine purchase. It was Scott Cousins' ability to build strong relationships that opened up our European and Middle East financial networks, giving us the fuel to fund our projects. And if Prime Minister Harper wants to get a permit for the Enbridge pipeline, he'll need to hire our own Davy Copeland. Dave is the only guy I know who can successfully fight through Canada's permitting structure and come out on the other side with his sanity, or most of it. Then Dr. Dave Jennings, a very talented geoscientist, joined us and found our Campo Morado success. More recently, we're proud to have Russ Halbar and Marshawn Snyman join us as partners. And behind these creative partners is the constantly growing HDI team, a team of type A personalities, all with the wide-ranging skills needed to find and develop and operate mines. And I predict there will be several more Hall of Famers from the HDI team in the years ahead. I salute all my partners and all the people that work at HD, past and present, for the lifelong bonds and the incredible experiences that we've created together. I'm honored to be recognized here tonight and welcomed into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame with my friend and colleague, Bob Hunter. I am proud to be a Canadian, and I'm really proud to be in the mining industry. Thank you very much.
Let me just present you with your award, or your bag of awards.
Do I go down there?
I am truly honored to be here today to accept this induction on behalf of my father, Bob Hunter. I also congratulate Bob Dickinson, my father's partner of many years, for his well-deserved recognition. My father had a great passion for this business that he passed on to everyone he met. I remember him more than once coming home with a bag of rocks and telling me about his latest projects, and often said, Bob Dickinson said this one's going to be an ore body. And more often than not, he was right. My father had a tremendous respect for the geologists, engineers, and all the people that worked for them. He knew that his success wasn't possible without the contributions of all of these people. His greatest motivation, though, was to build something of value for the shareholders. He took pride in being a part of this industry and would be very pleased to receive this induction to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. I thank you on behalf of my family for recognizing my father's successes and contributions.
I just want to add very briefly to Scott's comments and say how pleased I was when I first heard the news about this induction of my father into the Hall of Fame. And in thinking about what I would want to the few comments to share with you tonight, I was thinking about why was that so important to me? And I think it was I had this recognition that the mining industry defined in large measure the latter half of his entire life, but because of illness and an untimely accident, he was a very proud person, so many of you know him, and he never had the chance to sort of graciously end his career, I think, the way he would have liked to have. And I always wondered after that how he would be remembered, or whether he would be remembered. And yet I've so many times been pleased in my own professional life and in my travels when I meet people, and the people that come up to me unsolicited and tell the most fabulous stories to me, and it's so heartwarming every time I hear that. And what a fabulous legacy that is. And I think that this event is just a proof positive on a grand scale of that. And what a great legacy. And it just gives me great pleasure to know how well remembered he is. And I thank you very much. Thank you.
David, Scott.
Okay, so you got it. So if you got a project, you know where to go. Okay, right? Okay.